the regular council meeting on Monday, September 28, 2020. First issue on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And
we need Michael to mute himself.
Michael muted himself.
We need him to, so that might get rid of the feedback.
Well, maybe.
Muted. Wasn't.
That's better. That's better. Yeah, that's good. Perfect.
I have something to add.
Okay, go ahead, Sue Ellen.
I was wondering if we wanted to add Union of BC Municipalities conference and meetings, just to give a quick update or not.
I don't know if everybody's prepared to do that at this point.
Let's defer it to the next meeting so we can be more coherent.
Sure. It's
Yeah,
just-
I don't think
happened
it's
last week.
it's not time sensitive, so I think that'd be a good idea if we just leave it for now. There was an on table package that everybody got, and yes, that's the one. And there's 4 items for the regular meeting. 7.1, which is a deferral, so that's canceled. 7.6 is deferral of the DVP 09-2020 at 1710 White Cells. That has been pushed back. And 7.7, there's a PowerPoint presentation that's been added to that. And 8.2 is additional information and revised recommendation to the Bowen Island Food Resilience Society. So we'll cover those as we move through that part of it. Anybody else have anything else that they'd like to add to the agenda?
I just want to note that 7.1 and 7.6, we will need to adopt those motions to defer when we get to them.
Okay, thank you, Hope. And okay, I'll move to adopt they approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Look good, Hope?
Looks great.
Thank you. Move on to public comments. Do we have anybody on the sheet, Hope?
We've got no one on the speakers list, and we've got no members of the public present.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll move right on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they'd like a little bit of clarification on? Wow.
Aaron,
Yes, go ahead, Allison.
I'd like to pull 3.4.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry, 3.5.
Okay, you saved me doing that. I was going to pull that anyway. Thank you, Allison. And anybody else?
Councilor Nicholson has her hand up.
Okay, thank you. Maureen?
3.3 and
Yeah.
3.4, and those are minor points, so nothing substantive.
Okay, we'll put those all into section 11 there, unless somebody's got an objection to that. Thank you.
Gary, if they could,
Yeah.
if there's a possibility of bringing them forward so that staff don't have to be here until the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I don't know if that's an option.
We could squeeze them under staff report under 7.9 and 7.10 and 7.11.
Doesn't make much difference.
Probably not.
Well,
I don't have a 7.9.
better than the end. No, it will become 7.9
Okay.
Yeah.
and then
As
onwards.
soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay. You want to put them both in there at 7.9? 3.3 and 3.4?
And 3.5?
They can just go 7, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, they need separate items.
Okay. And I guess 3.5.
Yeah, so 7.
7.5
Yeah,
will
that-
become 7.11.
Okay, perfect.
7.11.
All right, and the recommendation is the council approve the items as outlined in September 28th, 2020 consent agenda as amended. I'll move that.
Second.
Thank Sue Ellen, I got, and all in favor.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so delegations, we have none. Move on to the business arising from the minutes. So we'll move right into this. The site alteration bylaw and hazardous areas DP area work plan, and that's Jennifer Pierce, planner 1. Thanks, Jennifer. Are you in?
Yes, I am
There she is,
here.
yeah. Okay,
Just opening the file and let me share my screen. Okay, is that working for everyone?
yes, it is, for me anyway.
All right. So today I will be presenting to you the site alteration bylaw and hazardous areas development permit area work plan. First, I will explain the directive of this work plan. So based on the committee of the whole recommendation that came through in February, staff was directed to develop this work plan for both types of regulations. One bylaw that would address development in hazardous areas and also addressing site alteration that can exacerbate risks to people and the environment. And this recommendation was based on the fulfillment of several OCP objectives, some of which are listed here, and as well as part of priority B1 in the island plan. So this is the fulfillment or partial fulfillment of those items. The aim of this work plan is to produce a coordinated set of two separate types of bylaws. One would be a hazardous areas development permit area, and one is a site alteration bylaw. And together, these would seek to address risks to people and the environment that are posed by larger scale development and site preparation activities. So these are activities that occur before a person typically would come to us for a development permit or a building permit. The hazardous areas development permit area would be within a predefined area, as development permit areas typically would be. And they're designed to mitigate vulnerability of people or the environment to hazards that can be exacerbated by development. The site alteration bylaw is about mitigating damage that is as a result of particular actions, which might include things like blasting, soil disturbance, or clearing. And they're triggered by the magnitude of the work rather than by the area of the work. So that's generally measured in volume of disturbance or area of land. So that's the difference between these two bylaws that are being proposed as part of the work plan. Just a quick background is that there was a similar bylaw that came forward in 2011, but was not adopted. And that was a steep slopes bylaw that was based on a map that is already included in the OCP. It's as Schedule B2. And it was based on regulations that would occur in areas where slopes were 30% and above 30%. So this work plan is separate from that in that it would seek to define the development permit area differently rather than a flat out 30%. It would seek to be more refined in its definition such that that map would not be the map that would be used. We would develop a new map. So the proposed work plan on this goes through basically 1 year. And the concept is that both of these bylaws, while they're developed with knowledge of one another, that they can occur on simultaneous time tracks so that we can get them implemented when they're ready rather than waiting until both are fully developed. So the first part is just reviewing comparable bylaws and other local regulations to determine best practices and confirm the information that's needed. Then there would be the selection of consultants or whomever would be helping us as experts in implementing the program. The type of expertise we would be seeking is geotechnical expertise and also expertise in clearing of vegetation, which would be like a forester that can tell us what are the consequences of clearing different areas and where we might want to be more concerned than otherwise. Then in the proposed work plan, it then kind of divides up into these two parallel paths, one for the site alteration bylaw and one for the hazardous areas. So in the site alteration bylaw, we need to identify what types of activities would trigger the bylaw and what scale is most appropriate for that trigger to draft the document itself, and also to look at enforcement mechanisms so that the bylaw is effective. It would involve public engagement, primarily online, and then finding the results of that engagement, adjusting the bylaw and proposing it for adoption. So So that's a pretty simple kind of typical bylaw work plan. Meanwhile, for the hazardous areas DPA, this gets a little bit more in depth because we would need to gather spatial data and analyze that data to establish which areas have higher vulnerability and define the trigger, at what degree of vulnerability do we want to designate the area, and then determine the permit application process that one would have to go through that would ensure that those risks are mitigated. Then we get to drafting the bylaw document, drafting a geotechnical assessment report terms of reference so that our geotechnical assessors would know what's expected. The same public engagement would be required, a new map of the DP area, and then finally an amendment to the OCP that would include the new revised DP area and then adoption of the bylaw. So finally, each one of these bylaws would need to be rolled out with announcements to the public so that they're not caught unawares of any new requirements. So this would need to be focused to particular stakeholders in particular, but also just general communications. And this rollout, while it's listed here as if it's one step, would probably occur in kind of 2 phases for each one of the bylaws as they're available. So as part of the work plan, I've developed a budget, and the budget takes a particular base scenario, and then there's 2 alternatives with their own budgets. So in the base scenario budget, the total is $8,800 for the full work plan with both bylaws. And this base scenario is including the cost for a forester external consultant, but as well for the geotechnical expertise. I've identified a couple of different graduate level geotechnical student work programs that we can take advantage of in order to get expertise without as high of a fee and working with a local university. So I've listed here 2 possibilities. There's also some other co-ops that we can explore, but these would largely determine how many hours we would get, what the timeline would be. And because they have their own timeline for application and that kind of thing, there's some level of uncertainty associated with these. So I've put in there the budget for the more expensive program, which is the My Tax Accelerate internship, and then put in the budget that way so that hopefully whatever program we end up using, that budget would cover it. The alternates would be to hire a more standard geotechnical team to take this on. And based on phone calls with those geotechnical consultants, their analysis and field work is more around the lines of $20,000 to $50,000, depending on whether they do field work or not. And they definitely recommended having the opportunity to come on site. And that's when the larger cost comes into play. I also explored another alternate, trying to keep the costs down, which would involve utilizing more in-staff time and then bringing on the geotechnical consultants only when we need them. And that would involve having staff learn more things about some of the concepts in here because we don't have necessarily geotechnical expertise in-house. So that's kind of a hybrid that tries to build on in-house knowledge as much as possible. So that forms the 3 scenarios: the base scenario, alternate 1, and alternate 2. So ultimately, the recommendation that I'm recommending here is that council would approve the site alteration bylaw and hazardous areas DP area work plan as presented, which is with the base scenario.
All right, is that it, Jen?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very, very thorough application. There's no question about that. A couple of questions from me is just larger development. What does that look like? And is some way you can quantify that?
So I'm not prepared to provide any sort of numbers at this time, but the idea here being that conceptually speaking, everyday work such as cutting a single tree or clearing for a small garden or that kind of thing would ideally not trigger these types of regulations, but a clearing for a development like a full residential neighborhood obviously would. And then there's the question of, okay, in between those two extremes, where does that line fall? And that will have to be investigated as part of the bylaw process based on what other municipalities have done and the sizes of developments that happen on Bowen, so that we're having less burden on people that are just trying to, you know, live their lives on Bowen the way that they are now versus actual enlargements of development that would present a risk, so that we can catch the risks, but not have a lot of burden on people just going about their business.
Okay, that's about it for me. I'm just thinking of somebody that might be trying to develop a piece of property, just build a house on a piece of property. And, you know, I guess what happened in the old days was the building inspector would look at the plans and he'd look at the topo map and he'd say, well, this is going to require a geotech. So at which point they'd have to bring in a geotech just to look at stability and a whole bunch of other things. So would that still be in effect? And if that house wasn't being built in a development permit area because of the hazardous or steep slopes, hazardous slopes, I guess there wouldn't be that responsibility for the building inspector.
So this is in response to a gap in our ability to react to work that's happening on the island. So it's somewhat, it's not so uncommon that by the time a permit application comes in, the site has been prepared for the work, but the work hasn't yet been started because that requires the permit. And so by the time we see it, because the clearing has already occurred, blasting has occurred, clearing of the forest has occurred, and at that point, it's not really something that can be put back. So if it's a larger development, there are cases where we may have wanted to have had some influence over the location of that blasting or the scale of it. So this is meant to catch those things that are currently, it's kind of common practice to do those things first and then go for your permit, which is the way that the permits are written. So this is intended to catch those types of activities earlier. Does that answer?
Yes, it certainly does. And I'd certainly be wholeheartedly in agreement with what you're saying, because there's been some devastating shall we say, preparation around. So if that would eliminate that, I'd be very happy with that. So they would have to check in before and would have to be very publicly known that you don't even touch your property until you've made sure that it's not in that particular DP.
Right, and that's
DPP.
why enforcement is included in the work plan as part of the development of the bylaw, because without a proper enforcement mechanism, there wouldn't be the incentive to come first and get the permit. It would be rather incentivized to do the work first and then ask for forgiveness later. So that's an important balance that will have to be found as well.
As it's been historically. Anybody else? Well,
There's a bunch of us.
Okay, hold on. I'm just getting in there now. Yeah. Sue Ellen, you're first.
Okay, thank you. My question is, this is great to see. I'm really pleased to see it, and I'm interested. I have a couple of questions. One of them is, I'm really happy to see the public engagement part, because without that, people feel constrained to ask questions or confront neighbors, or there's just a work crew. How do they know what's going on? And then later, I've heard over the years of little rocks bouncing through their basement windows and water coming out and taking away part of their driveway. Anyway, so I'm just, I'm interested in, does the engagement happen with both bylaws or just the, which one?
Yes, so engagement is included in both, and it's important to differentiate the engagement which is involved early on and helps in the development of the bylaws from the public communications that occur afterwards to make sure that everyone's aware of the new requirement. Those are two different things, and the initial engagement connects in some ways to Gary's question, or to the mayor's question, about the scale, because a lot of those questions can be refined based on public feedback, so that we're ensuring that we are mitigating those risks without capturing too many smaller projects.
Okay, thank you. And then I was glad to see, my last point is just, I was glad to see stormwater referred to in there, except I found it called runoff. And what I call boulders, you were calling rock fall. And I think there was some earlier mapping back at the previous OCP that we did. There was some maps of where boulders are down at the bottom of some steep slopes. If you need that, I might be able to help dig that out.
That would be great.
Okay.
One thing that I didn't mention in this presentation, but is a significant part of why this is good timing for these particular bylaws, is that we now have much higher detail information about the topography and the conditions on the island. So that will allow us to create a more detailed plan that would capture some of those things.
Yes, I saw the Islands Trust came through with the LiDAR mapping.
Yes.
12 points per square meter. That's great.
All right, thank you, Sue Ellen. Allison?
I guess it's the whole definition. I'm glad to see we're not talking about just because it's steep, it's automatically a hazard. Because that was part of the problem in the last one. And just having had a conversation at the dinner table last night, I think it's going to be very important to define what hazard is. And then I was also curious, when you refer to fire, I assume you're meaning wildfire or forest fire, you're not meaning house fires.
Yes. I think wildfires mainly, would be.
Yeah.
that
But
part.
not somebody's house catching on fire as the fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to become a wildfire to go from house to house anyway.
And I guess I found that the statement about not impeding everyday work by locals, in interesting phrase rather than everyday work by property owners. Because, yeah, anyhow, yeah, I think it's just going to be really important to define, and that was the big sticking point the last time was the debate over what is a hazard.
All right,
thanks
thanks,
for that.
Allison. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just wanted to say thank you for that, because we'll definitely include that in the proposals that we're asking for.
All right. Maureen?
Thank you. When this came forward, I wasn't sure I would vote in support of it. And part of the reason is timing. We have a council strategic planning session coming up on October the 19th. And I would like to get a sense of how this work fits into other planning work that is either hoped for or required in the coming year. These bylaws have been on the agenda for almost a decade and possibly more than that. And I think it would be prudent to maybe hold off for a month and a bit until we have a bit more of a sense of what's in front of us as a council in the next 2 years. And then if we do support it, to be very clear about what it is we're supporting. The recommendation as written is not sufficiently clear. It doesn't specify which of the base scenarios we are prepared to support. It doesn't specify the amount of funding we would be prepared to allocate to this project. So there's some work that needs to be done there. And for that reason, I'd like to move to defer.
Okay. David?
Thank you, Gary. I'm not sure that I agree with what Maureen just said about the budget not being clear. The question I was going to ask is, I like the base case because it's not expensive. But what I really wanted to understand was that, you know, you've identified a couple of potential places to get students, graduate students. Are you sufficiently confident that we could get those students for that price so that, in other words, so that the scope that you have, the cost that you have for this is sufficient? Or would it be the situation where you'd have to try to get those folks, and if you couldn't get it, then we have to come back to council to go get one of the other ones? So how confident, my question then is, how confident are you in the base case? Have you already talked to these two institutions, or are you familiar with the particular grad students and so on? Please, Jennifer.
So in the case of the Sustainability Scholars Program, I'm very familiar with that program. I was a participant in that program as a PhD student, and I have also successfully applied for and am now looking at students for a separate project for the Sustainability Scholars. And so the way that it would work is we would put together a proposal similar to the draft proposal that I've attached to the report. That stipulates what area of expertise we're looking for. The university then takes on the burden of identifying students and provides you with 3 different options of students that you can then interview and choose among. So there's always a chance that they would not find students that meet the requirements or that are interested in the project. So that's always a risk, just as any employment or thing like that would work. But if they do identify students that they feel are able to meet those things, then they help you, make sure either through mentors at the university or through the expertise of the students that they're able to provide that. And one of the things that I have limited myself to in seeking these different things is only graduate level students that already have experience in this area. So it would be similar to like a capstone project at the graduate level would be the expertise that they're providing. And because a lot of the work that we need is in this technical GIS area, in some ways it's very similar to the work we'd get through a consulting firm because they rely on their junior entry-level students to do much of that work. The MyTex program I'm not as familiar with, so I can't provide as many details on that one. So there would need to be a little bit of understanding if we were to go with the base scenario that it's always possible that we wouldn't be able to find the appropriate expertise through a student work program. And then we would need to fall back to some other option. So that's always a possibility, but I would think that that would be something that would trigger coming back to council.
Okay.
If you approve the base scenario, it would not also be an implicit approval of the alternates.
Okay. So that's where I am, because to Maureen's point, the other 2 options, kind of the one where the staff would do a whole bunch of work, what wasn't clear there was how much work and what would that really mean in terms of our other work. So I'm happy to support the base approach. And if that simply doesn't work out, but it sounds like you understand it quite well, I'm pretty pleased about that, then yeah, we'll have to come back to council to figure out what the next steps would be and whether we do have the resources and the time to do this in the 2 years we've got left. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
I've got my hand up again, Gary.
Okay, I see it. Allison, go ahead.
David's question triggered the other question I had. In looking at the timeline in the original package we got back in July, are we on track to be able to get a sustainability scholar from UBC this year? Because it's talking about getting them all lined up, getting an application in August.
Mm-hmm. That may be actually some older text because we were originally applying for this previous time, which was a different type of application than they're doing in the future. This was the one that they just finished was because of COVID, they were having a very competitive thing with no cost, and we were hoping to get awarded a student through that program, but we were not. So
Okay,
I had to adjust the timeline to the new program where you pay
are
as usual. And yes, they do it every year. And I've been in conversation with
because look
that
at the
director.
UBC Sustainability Scholars package that we got in July. It had a whole program timeline in it. So that's not.
So that's the previous season, I guess you might say. They do it every year, or maybe even every semester.
Well, I guess that's because we've certainly missed the deadlines on the basis of this for the October one. So that was,
Right, but the next one is still, it's coming up.
okay.
Thanks, Allison.
And I guess we could put base case into the resolution. The council approves the site alteration bylaw and hazardous plans DP work plan base case as presented at today's date.
Okay. We
I second
check.
that amendment.
I agree with that. I thought the base case was kind of assumed.
I did put forward a motion there. So I would move to postpone this recommendation to our meeting of October the 26th. I'd like to see if anyone would be prepared to second that.
I guess I'll what I'd like to understand from Jennifer before I do that is whether that would put us out, make us too late for the, to be able to access the university students, in the fall sort of thing, or does that, if we wait until after October, does that change our time quite a bit and turn it into a different year sort of thing?
Well, that could move us into November for that hazardous areas DP area. Just waiting to go back to council again. So it is a bit of a delay, but I wouldn't be as concerned about that as I would the other one, the site alteration bylaw, which I would hope to have substantially moved forward before then so that we can get it in place as soon as possible. So that would be more my concern, whereas the hazardous areas DP is a bit delayed, waiting on the timelines of the various programs.
I could just.
Can we split those two? Or is that not working? Because I tend to agree with you that there is some urgency in the site alteration. But I guess they all need the public process, which would be all doubled up again. I got a little problem with for us paying for everything. It would be nice if the developer would be paying for that in the long run. That's what would normally happen. Anyway,
Maureen had her hand back up, Gary.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mark. Sorry, Sue Ellen first.
I'll wait.
Okay, Maureen.
Okay, I just want to say that this has been urgent for a decade. And we have run at it from multiple directions in that time. And it's always come up against issues of there being insufficient staff time, there being lack of mapping. And it's great to hear that the mapping is now at a much more granular level. But I just want to make sure that if we start in on this, that we're likely to get it finished. And I think we'll have a clearer sense of whether we're likely to have it finished if we give it a month and figure out where we are as a council. And this by no means reflects on what Jennifer is proposing, the caliber of what she's proposing. I think it's the most solid thing that we've seen on these two bylaws. But I'm just worried about the bigger picture.
Okay, I'll second Maureen's request.
For which one?
The motion to postpone to
Both of them?
October the 26th.
Both of them?
Yes,
Thank you.
you guys can call it.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
Yeah.
Sue Ellen?
I'm opposed to that idea, partly because it has been over a decade that the community has been looking for these kinds of protections. And it's been a year since we passed it in or more than a year since we put it in our island plan. To me, these are straightforward looking. Now we have the technical input, and both these work plan, the mapping, that used to be a sticking point. And we've heard clear division between people going about their ordinary work and bigger projects, and these things are going to be defined. I think that'll help everybody. And we've got the engagement pieces for both. I think it's time to move ahead before everything is flattened and blasted on Bowen. And to put it off now, we could be putting off other things on the agenda too, until after we've talked on the 19th. I think it's a limited amount of work with a costed out budget that's here compared to some of our other projects. It's quite small. And so I'd like to move ahead with it.
Okay, thanks, Sue Ellen. David?
Thank you, Gary. I guess I'd like to check with Liam. I mean, I'm sensitive to what Sue Ellen just said and what Maureen said. There's two ways of looking at the 10 years of delay. I just want to go back to Liam and say, in terms of our work plans, is this sufficiently burdensome that we'd need to,
Delay it.
fit in with everything else, or is there some ability to move forward right away?
Okay.
Yeah, hi, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Hawking. And
Sorry,
thanks
I want
to,
to jump in really quickly, and I should have caught this earlier, that after a motion's been moved and seconded to be deferred, it can't be debated. So we need to call the question on that motion and then move on. Unless it's defeated, then we can continue.
Can we not have further discussion on it?
No, after it's been moved and seconded, it needs to be voted on.
That's new to me.
Not new to me.
No,
Okay.
Allison caught it and I missed it. I apologize. Thanks, Councilor Morse.
Okay. Well, and I guess we're, if there is no further discussion, I guess, I'll ask a question. All in favor?
In favor of which now, Gary? Favor
All
of,
in favor of the motion to defer.
I'm in
Okay,
favor.
and opposed? What's that look like? Oh,
Motion's defeated. Councilor Morse
Okay.
or Councilor Nicholson was the only one in favor.
all right.
And I'd like to move the other motion.
I'll second that.
Can we insert the words base case in the?
Yeah, I was going to, here,
I
I'll
like
read
that.
the motion that I'd like to move. That council approve the site alteration bylaw and hazardous areas DP area work plan as per the base scenario presented at the September 28, 2020 council meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 And opposed?
Motion was carried.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to bylaws, which were dealt with under the consent agenda. Staff reports. And now 7.1 has been deferred. And I guess we need a motion to defer that, Hope?
Thank you.
I'll move that.
Okay, thank you. And I'll second it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And we'll move on to 7.2, which is 992 Dorman Road, Unit 203, DK Harris Properties Limited. And it's RZ01 2020. And back to you, Jennifer Pierce, Planner 1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you once again, Mayor and Council. I'll be presenting to you the rezoning application 01-2020 at 992 Dorman Road, Unit 203. This application is for a location on Bowen Island in the middle of Snook Cove as part of Artisan Square on Dorman Road, indicated with the blue and yellow outline here, and Unit 203 is this particular unit in yellow highlighted here. You can see that it is zoned in CD2 Area 3, which currently allows for mixed uses of general services, offices, retail, restaurants, public community facilities, parking with accessory dwellings and home occupational uses. The existing building has the residences above and the retail uses down below. The yellow rectangle here is showing Unit 203, which is the unit doing this application. It's currently the location of the Happy Isle retail cannabis store. And here is the plan showing the site with its allotted parking. The unit currently faces Dorman Road through its primary entrance, and it's a 57 square meter unit, or about 613 square feet. The application itself is to continue use as a non-medical cannabis retail unit. It does not involve any alterations to the building or to the site. Currently, the Happy Isle Cannabis Company is operating on site and has been for some time under a temporary use permit, which began in September 1, 2018 and will expire on in August of 2021, it should be. So this application was sent out for comment to RCMP, to BYLAWS services and other departments, and no concerns have come back. There have been no calls of concern from the neighborhood during their entire duration of their occupancy in this location. I'd also like to point out that the legislative authority to regulate this is through the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act, which regulates retail store licenses, and furthermore through the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, which delegates the authority to regulate and license through zoning restrictions, business regulations, and fees at the local level. So that's what we're operating under here. So what this rezoning application would involve is no OCP amendment, because the proposed zoning under OCP is village commercial, which allows for mixed use commercial and residential. But it would require a land use bylaw amendment to the zoning area to include as a permitted use the non-medicinal cannabis retail unit. However, the draft permit as provided would limit to no more than 1 unit and no larger than 80 square meters. And I want to point out the 80 because there was a typo in the other application that said 800, but it should be 80 square meters for that 1 unit, which is slightly larger than the current unit to allow for slight variations, but not a large variation. So the recommendation at this time is that council would refer this application to the Advisory Planning Commission and Community Economic Development Committee, and direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for this development proposal as applied.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. And is anybody want to chat to this? I think they've done an incredible job there. And
I'd be prepared to move that, Jerry.
okay,
And I'd be happy to second it.
there's a second over at Michael there. Further discussion? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Right.
You okay, Hope? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on. Thank you, Jennifer. Oh, sorry, you're back in here. Crown Land Referral, 072019, PID 024779440. And back to you, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I think this is my last one. So this is a Crown Land Referral number 07-2119 or 2019 for a waterfront lot. So the location here is on the west side of Bowen, just next to the Crown lands there. And it's a waterfront access only lot. So here you can see it with the aerial photographs. And then with zoning, you can see that the lot area is a WG1 water area zone. And here's just a photograph of the lot itself from the water. So you can see that this is a water access only lot. It has a rocky shoreline. There's no beachfront, and there's currently no development on this particular lot. In the photo to the right, you'll see the neighboring improvement that's been done there to access the water, but that's not part of this application. So in the referral, we have here, I'm showing the site plan for the dock itself. It would be a permanent new private moorage facility. And as part of this application, they've also completed an environmental assessment specific to this application. And since then, this Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development has referred this application to us, asking us if the application meets our bylaws. So a review of the application did include some environmental implications, but the application does comply based on our review with the restrictions as stipulated in the WG1 zone of our land use bylaw. So given that, the recommendation is that we've received the referral from the ministry, and we have no objection based on compliance with the permitted use accorded in our land use bylaw.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Anybody like to speak to that?
I'd be happy to propose that motion.
Good, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, David. Any further discussion? We have the recommendation from the planner. Although the work has been done, it's not a beach access area, and I feel pretty confident that it should go ahead. Any other comments? Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of points, and maybe I'll start with the easy one. The adjacent neighboring dock, what's the length of that? Do you know?
I do not know the length of that.
Okay. The summary of the ecological, environmental, and climate implications. There are a couple of points there related to anchor chains and the materials that are being used, that I'm wondering if we have any option of providing feedback to the province that we would be, we would like to know how the property owner plans to mitigate any potential damage from the anchor chains, and whether there's any willingness to look at alternative materials. It seemed to me that given the bylaw that we have in place about eelgrass meadows and so forth, that there were some concerns that probably ought to be brought to the attention of the province, because 5 paragraphs of ecological, environmental, climate implications is not an unproblematic application from my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Sue Ellen?
I'd be interested in, I guess staff have already contacted the Crown, but at some point it would be good to tackle these issues of creosote and anchor chains. And I was confused about the eelgrass. I gather that's in number 3, transect 3. Was that where the eelgrass was? So it's away from the float?
So I don't have memorized the locations of the eelgrass, but basically what the environmental assessment returned was that there were certain areas that were more sensitive than others, and they directed a slight shift in the location of the dock, as well as recommending the semi-translucent materials to be used so that sunlight could filter down. And as a result of those mitigations, did not foresee damage to the eelgrass that was identified in the area.
Thank you. Then I'll just continue. I think the the part that stuck out for me was that sea stars are going to benefit because they can hang on to the creosote. I'm going, come on. But the point
I
is,
believe, Sue Ellen,
I'm glad that, yeah, go ahead.
I believe that is in reference to the footings, which would be a precast concrete, not creosote.
Right,
I would hope
with
so.
rocks. Okay, but I just, I take your point. Thank you. I just, I added up the meters of the float, and as long as they put it in the way they've drawn it there, it is within our bylaw, our docks bylaw, which is good to see for a change. And some people have asked for variances right off the bat. So this is good to see somebody who's looking at, the applicant is looking at our bylaws. And I like the idea of looking at floats in the anchor chain and creosote and things. And I think we could put those perhaps in our bylaws, or we could say that docks don't have to have, they can't have loose styrofoam in them. For example, there's better ways to do these kinds of docks so that winter storms, when they are damaged don't damage, but I don't think we have that here. And I don't have any more questions. It meets our current bylaws as far as I can tell.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. Anybody else?
Mayor, if I may answer
go ahead,
Maureen's
Jennifer.
question about what council may respond with. So we've been asked by the ministry to respond as to whether this meets our bylaws or does not. So they're seeking an answer to that. However, there's nothing stopping council from also providing additional statements of clarification or things that they would like to express. So something like that could also be submitted in addition to the answer.
I would appreciate that.
Yep.
And if there were that commitment, then I could support the recommendation.
I think if we could have concerns about creosote and concerns about anchor chains without floats and concerns about it being okay to cut off some of the light, but not saying how much light. Because in my experience, plants are very sensitive to the amount of sunlight, and any shading can make them blink out.
Okay, we have this first and moved and seconded. Does anybody want to change it? Or should we just take the vote? I think these are all good ideas, but I think we should implant them into our bylaws if we want to enforce them.
But we could make suggestions, but I would do that as a separate motion.
Okay, well, let's vote on this motion and then talk about a different motion. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Maureen, do you still have your hand up or not?
No.
Okay. Were you in opposition there?
No.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to just put another note into Flynn Road on that?
Yeah, I would move
Yep.
that council request staff to express their concerns with the potential ecological impacts of creosote, anchor chains without floats, and structures limiting sunlight.
Okay, thank you. Somebody want to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Maureen. And I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Got them all, Hope?
That's everyone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you. And we are now.
Thank you.
Okay, 7.6 has been deferred. And we're going to move on to 7.7. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. That was great. And 7.7, which is the mid-year 2020 financial results. Raj Hare, Chief Financial Officer. Okay, Raj, it's all you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to share my screen.
Sorry, Mary Andrew, I think we missed a few here.
Yeah. We missed 7.5. I'm going to go back, Raj. I'm going to just put you on hold there for a second.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I will stop sharing my screen.
Well, wait a minute here. What did I miss here?
We're on 7.4, which is the community energy and emissions.
Oh, yeah.
Update.
I turned the page already. I was way ahead of
Good.
you. Sorry about that.
Good.
Okay. Okay, so 7.4, Community Energy and Emissions Plan Update. Bonnie Brokenshire, Manager of Environment and Parks Planning. Hi, Bonnie. Thank you. Bonnie, you there?
Bonnie, I think you're muted. Can't hear you.
There you go.
There we go. So good evening, Mayor and Council. And the purpose for tonight's presentation is to request funds from the Carbon Neutral Initiatives Reserve to update the Bowen Island Municipality Community Energy and Emissions Plan. Updating the CEEP, the Community Energy and Emissions Plan is also known as the CEEP, will enable BIM to keep moving towards carbon neutrality.
We lost you again.
A little bit of background, both the island plans of 216 and 217 identified a climate action program as a priority. BIM renewed its membership with the Community Energy Association in 2016. And in order to move forward toward carbon neutrality, a collaborative consultative process led by BIM staff and the Community Energy Association culminated in BIM's first Community Energy and Emissions Plan. The CEEP was adopted by Council in the fall of 2016. And the plan has guided BIM's climate action from 2017 till present. With the intent of the first plan was always that it would be updated in 2021. And I also want to mention that in 2019 and 2020 as well, the island plans did identify implementation of the CEEP as a commitment. Just a little bit about the Community Energy Association, for those of you who aren't familiar. They've been busy. So the Community Energy Association's mission is to build capacity and accelerate action on climate and energy collaboratively with local government. And it is a not-for-profit professional advisory board with amazing professionals and knowledgeable people, probably some of the best in the province. And they work with local governments to try to close the implementation gap. The CEA has helped to create over 65 community energy and emission plans throughout the province. So implementation of the CEEP from 2017 till present, just some highlights that have come out of that plan are completion of an on-island composting feasibility study, examination of next steps, progress on the multi-use pathway project and other active transportation initiatives, the site alteration bylaw development underway, land use bylaw updates underway, conservation policy development underway, adoption of the climate action strategy, and adoption of step code level 3 as of soon, October 1st, 2020. So updating the CEEP. The updated CEEP will incorporate the most up-to-date emissions data and analysis initiatives identified through the consultation process and components of BIM's climate action strategy and other relevant plans and policies. Outstanding initiatives that still have council and community support will be brought forward into the updated plan. So here's just a little list of the timeline scheduled for the update. Financial implications. The CEA has secured partial funding this year from BC Hydro towards updating BIM's CEEP. This funding is not guaranteed in 2021. BC Hydro has withdrawn quite a bit of funding. Our first CEEP was funded completely through BC Hydro money, but over the years, that funding has dwindled somewhat. To obtain this available grant, a commitment to taking part in the project needs to be made in 2020, hence the report before you tonight. And BIM's costs associated with the CEEP update is $7,500, $3,750 to be paid in 2020 at the start of the project, and the remainder to be paid in 2021 at the completion of the project. So the recommendation before council tonight is that council approve a financial plan amendment to include a $7,500 expenditure in 2020 from the Carbon Neutral Initiatives Reserve Fund to update Bowen Island Municipality's Community Energy and Emissions Plan.
All right, well, thanks, Bonnie. How much is in that fund now, in the carbon
There-
neutral initiatives reserve fund?
There's approximately 10K.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions? Thank you, Bonnie. That was awesome.
My hand up.
Yeah, I see that. Allison.
Okay. How much funding have we got from BC Hydro?
So the CEA has received or have been promised $7,500 from BC Hydro. So we're paying
we have
half.
to match that?
Yeah.
So the whole project's going to cost 15,000.
Yeah.
And how much have we put in the financial plan already?
How much have we put in the financial plan? I'm not quite sure what you're
Well, if we're
asking.
amending the financial plan, the whole project's going to cost 15,000
No,
and 7,500 coming from BC Hydro. Then we have to put in grant revenue of 7,500 and an expenditure of 15, or is BC Hydro paying it directly?
Yeah, we don't see that $7,500. The CEA has secured that funding on our behalf, but we do not see the $7,500 if that's what you're asking. We just need to contribute. We need to give $7,500 to the CEA to assist us to update the plan. Their costs would be more would actually supersede. They would be more expensive than the $7,500 with all their expertise and analysis and their consultative help. So yeah, that's where the funding comes, but they secure that through their connection with BC Hydro.
Okay, Allison.
So we have to contract at CEA, then there's no choice of doing it in-house or anything like that. So my other question is, in digging back through the history of that $10,000 reserve fund being established, the note in 2008 or 2009 was that was for initiatives to achieve carbon neutral goals. So how does updating the CEEP fit into an initiative to achieve carbon neutral goals?
Yeah. Well, I know that one thing that if we don't try to reduce our emissions, we are not going to reach carbon neutrality. I could almost guarantee that. So what I hope with the update, because there's some really great reporting tools. So with this next 5 years, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I will have more of better reporting on actually how we are reducing our emissions. So all of the initiatives that will be outlined in the plan, do have through data analysis, through research, they have some quantitative component to them. So it all is geared towards achieving the lofty goal of carbon neutrality.
But we could spend that money directly on an action, not a study.
Well, I think the study guides
what I
us.
thought.
Yeah, so the study really guides us, and what it does is it will look at, these are experts that do great analysis. I hope to learn a lot from them. So in subsequent years that I could update it in-house, but these are, as I say, just phenomenal scientists and folks that deal with this all the time. So they're going to be able to see where we are, see maybe what we have reduced over the last 5 years. They're going to be able to really dig into the data and produce wonderful graphs and estimates. And so, yeah, we could do it in-house if we had the expertise and the time, but at this point, we don't have the time or the expertise like they have at the CEA.
All right. Is that good, Allison?
Left in the reserve fund to spend on any of the initiatives that we haven't done yet from the old plan.
Sure.
And I just wanted to say, I think the motion needs to be slightly reworded to give Raj some flexibility in how he does the financial plan. So it should say that council approve a 2020 financial plan amendment to include a $7,500 expenditure from the carbon initiatives. Because the money's being spent over 2 years.
Does that sound right, Raj? Does that work for you?
Technically that, I mean, both work. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks, Allison. Maureen?
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Bonnie, for the presentation. I'll be voting in support of this recommendation. The work that CEA did with us in 2016 was extremely helpful for council, for staff, and for the community members who attended. I think that there was always an expectation that we would revisit the plan with them in 5 years' time. And it's unfortunate that BC Hydro is not picking up the full tab as it did the last time. In thinking about this item, Councillor Hawking and I, as the council members on the ECAC, had a conversation, and the part of the focus was how can we get maximum value out of the expenditure and the workshop. And one suggestion that Councillor Hawking broached was that if we were able to give this this workshop a special focus on how to move from what is currently in our approved council climate strategy to implementing some of those some of the goals that are in the climate strategy. The value of CEA is that they work with municipalities throughout the province, and that's their job. They were given that job by the province to do that and to share information, to share successes and failures from other communities. So I think that the expenditure will be offset by the knowledge that we gain and the problems that we avoid. So I'll be voting in support.
Thank you, Maureen. Sue Ellen?
Thank you. I'll be voting in favor as well. I had been more active on the climate file in the previous term. And now with the Islands Trust, I'm active with the climate file on the Islands Trust term side, which complements this. And I think having a membership, we're a member of the Community Energy Association, and that's why we can get the grant funding and the expertise that they bring with it. I'll call it grant funding, even though it comes from BC Hydro through the Community Energy Association. And it'll help us get more grants to have a plan and to decide on the best actions in an ever-changing environment of research, options, technology, all those things. So I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Anybody else?
Bonnie's got her hand up.
Okay, Bonnie?
I just wanted to say the initial plan, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Fast were really instrumental in getting that going back in the day. So I was appreciative of that. And also too, the intent always was to integrate the climate action strategy. When I was working with Councillor Hawking on that strategy, that was always the thought, was integrating the components of that into our updated CEEP. They seem to align really well. And as I mentioned in the presentation, all of our other plans, like it really is a good place to bring everything together.
Well, it's certainly a good thing to find out where we're at exactly too, and how we sort of compare to other communities and that sort of thing. So I think it's very worthwhile. And I will read the recommendation. Is the council approve a 2020 financial plan amendment to include a $7,500 expenditure from the Carbon Initiatives Reserve Fund to update Bowen Island Municipality's Community Energy and Emissions Plan? The second on that, Sue Ellen, I got. Thank you. And I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you.
Everyone.
Okay, super. Thank you. That was great. Thanks, Bonnie. And so now we're going to move to 7.5, which is the development variance permit, DVP 08-2020. And it's 361 Cardina Drive, and it's Mike Lightbody and Emma Chow, Island Community Planner, or somebody else. Emma, are you here? Oh yeah, you are. Good. It's all yours, Emma.
This is development variance permit 08-2020 for 361 Cardina Drive. This is located in the Snug Point neighborhood in Snug Cove. This particular lot is fronting onto Snug Cove. It is a fairly small lot with an existing house, about 116 square meters in footprint. And this lot is almost entirely covered by required setbacks. So as you can see, the existing house is completely within the required sea setback of 30 meters. Its grandparented siting is at 14.9 meters from the sea. The applicant would like to put an addition onto the existing house. To accommodate this, they are looking for a reduction in that 30-meter sea setback to 15.5 meters. And for reference, the average existing neighbor setback is actually 20.3 meters. So it's asking for roughly 5-meter reduction. There is an existing deck. It's fairly light grays. I don't know if you see it show up here. The proposed addition is almost entirely on the existing deck, which runs to grade on the north side and is for the most part not far off the ground, about 2 feet. So the construction of this addition will have minimal impacts and definitely no additional environmental disturbance. So you can see in the architectural rendering, the addition will be 2 stories and will continue the existing architectural style and features. It is to house a dining room on the main floor and an additional bedroom above. The reason that the owners would like the addition, the current house is quite small at 116 square meters. It does not have an eating area and only 3 small bedrooms, all of which have sloping ceilings that really reduce the usable living space. The new owner is a family of 4, and they would really like the addition to provide additional space for their larger family. The photo on the left is a view of this house from the water, from Snug Cove. So this is where the ferry is pulling in. This is what you would see. And the addition is outlined in the light green on the right. The photo on the right shows it from behind, from the north side of the lot. And as you can see, it will be on a deck, on a deck that runs to grade pretty much, and it's not far off the ground here. Again, this is zoomed out from the water. The house is fairly shaded, tucked away behind some trees. So even with the addition, it won't be very visible from the water. We did get one concern from the building department regarding the capacity of the septic system on this lot to handle additional living space. And we did receive confirmation from a septic professional that this lot would be able to accommodate a septic system that would handle the additional living space. And I also included the photo on the right, which is an aerial photograph of the neighborhood. For those that are not familiar with Snug Point, this is a neighborhood that historically has a lot of dwellings that are almost entirely within the 30-meter setback because the lots are small and the houses are all sited quite close to the water. So given the lack of viable alternatives for any development on this lot without a variance due to the large extent of the required setbacks and the fairly modest reduction in sea setback that's being requested, as well as the historical siting of dwellings in this neighborhood, staff is recommending to council to go forward with public notice for DEP 08-2020, that council will be considering it at the meeting of November 9th. That's it.
All right, thank you, Emma. That's awesome. Any discussion?
I'll move that, Gary.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it, Gary.
And a second from Michael. Any discussion? I think it's the same old thing where the addition is actually in line with the rest of the house, so I don't think it's a big deal. I think at this point in time, we're just sending it out to the neighbors to have a look at and see if they have any input on it. Sue Ellen?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to say a few things. I think they're, as usual, I'm going to be speaking to the upholding of our bylaws for our island character at the gateway to our island. The official community plan has a number of things to say. It sounds very officious, like I'm just saying, no, everybody has to follow the same rules. But what I mean is that the setbacks are designed to manage development so that we keep the special character of our island as identified through a long community process of engagement, which is our official community plan. And that goes back many years. The community is consulted, and that's where these guidelines, these bylaws come from. And I think we've got a number of things in the official community plan that speak to maintaining the character of neighborhoods. I think there's a covenant on Snug Point that has to do with neighborhood character. I don't know if that's been looked at. I can't remember whether that's part of what's in there. Probably not, actually. But I sympathize with this family who wants a bigger dwelling. But for me, it's not the people, it's the properties that are the proper thing that council should be considering in looking at planning issues that affect the island into the future. So I'll be voting against this. I think they have a house, they bought a house on the island and on the Snug Point in a beautiful place. We have objectives in our bylaw about diverse housing. Not every house must get, or every house is allowed to get bigger. We have bylaws to manage growth, to keep what's special about Bowen. And by putting out this notice, we put the onus on the neighbors to try to maintain the quality of the neighborhood instead of us as council. And I think that's our, I feel it's my duty to say, I'll be voting against this.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. Rob?
Yeah, I just want to say that I sympathize with the comments Sue Ellen made. I guess the challenge that I have is that we have in the past allowed this to happen on other properties, so we've set a precedent in the past. But I do think this is a topic that maybe we as a council need to discuss and see how we move forward, and to what degree are we going to allow variances like this to pop forward versus each one just coming piece by piece, which makes it difficult to get a bit of a look at the cohesive whole of what we're doing. So I share your concerns, Councillor Fass, and I do think we need, as a council, to work on this moving forward, so we do have a bit of a plan on where we do make exceptions instead of just always making exceptions.
Yeah, maybe that's a discussion we can have at the strategic session.
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody else? I don't see anybody here.
Gary,
Yeah,
can I ask Emma to put that overhead
Allison, yeah.
count slide back up? So I think it was the last one, the aerial of the neighborhood.
Okay, it's coming.
Is that showing up?
Yeah. That's probably one of the smallest houses in the neighborhood. So,
Yes.
and they were small lots, they were built close to the water so that people could access by water. That is the character of that neighborhood, and I don't think expanding it would be wrecking the character of that neighborhood at all. It fits right in.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Maureen?
I agree with Councillor Morris in this case. I don't think allowing this expansion onto an existing deck and not increasing the footprint of the home is going to do significant harm. But I guess we'll hear from the neighbors.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, Michael?
Yes, I think they've taken real care to maintain the character and the form. And as Councillor Nicholson said, you know, this is not an aggrandizement of a footprint. So let's give it to the local community and see where it goes.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Anybody else? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. All right, the motion does pass, the recommendation. And we're going to move on. 7.6 has been deferred. I'll move to defer that.
Second.
Thank you, Allison. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you very much, everybody. And we'll move right into where I was a long time ago there, 7.7, the mid-year 2020 financial results. And over to Raj Hare, Chief Financial Officer. Away you go, Raj. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to share my screen here. And, oops. Okay, so the mid-year financial results for the general fund were reviewed with the Finance Advisory Committee at August 21st Finance Advisory Committee. Quarterly financial results will be reviewed with the Finance Advisory Committee on an ongoing basis and reported to Council going forward. So I'm going to just step into the results of the, I'm not going to go through the details of the report because you already have them. I'll just hit the highlights. So in terms of our operating expenditures, expenditures at June 30th totaled $3.2 million, which represents about 46% of the annual budget for operating expenditures. Given that we were halfway through the year at June 30th, anticipated spending or remaining budget should have been at about 50%. So we're fairly close. The council report included variance explanations in the service areas where the variance budget was greater than plus or minus 5% of expectation in each area. So overall, operating expenditures are trending close to budget at mid-year. Now, in terms of the capital results, our capital expenditures at mid-year, we had spent just short of $115,000 on a capital budget of $6 million. Spending on capital projects was light in contrast to the budget at mid-year for a number of reasons. There were delays in carrying out project work due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which started in March. Also, due to the timing of when projects, there was timing differences when projects could be done, or rather, there was timing impacting when projects could be done, what I meant to say. So for example, culvert repairs are limited to the fisheries window, which is a 2-week period, typically in late August, early September. There was also a reevaluation of the multi-use path, which was a significant project. And there were delays in the startup and construction of the fire hall and community center projects as well. Just in conclusion, overall expenditures were tracking close to budget. A third quarter review of the operating results is in process right now and will be accompanied with a projection of spending to December 31st, which will provide stronger information of year-to-date anticipated performance. And that should come back to Council in late November. It's slated to go to the Finance Committee in early November. And we also had reviewed a few tax collection statistics with the Finance Advisory Committee as well, just in terms of the number of deferments and new deferment applications and the percentage of taxes collected. So really the message here was that the COVID results for taxes collected as of August were very similar to the previous year. So we had good tracking or good collection experience with taxes. And I think I did mention at a previous closed meeting as well that all delinquent taxes were paid, so no tax sale on Bowen Island this year.
Hmm.
And that concludes my presentation. It's very, very high level, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that council members may have. Rather, I was just going to conclude by saying that actually I should have mentioned this earlier, but the Finance Advisory Committee confirmed that the general fund expenditures were reviewed as presented at the August 20th meeting, and that the Finance Advisory Committee had no concerns with the results reported at that time.
All right, thank you very much, Raj. That's that's very informative. Anybody have any questions? Sue Ellen.
Oh, nope, sorry.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, thanks for that report, Raj. And it was good that it went to the FAC. I think it's great that they see that and they can give us some report, their comments back. I guess one area that stands out for me is the fire and emergency services, and just looking how this is going to move forward the next 5 years. So right now we have about $500,000 a year we're spending on the department, but we just got a report a couple of months ago on things we need to be doing moving into the future, and a lot of stuff on there. I was sort of calculating it, and more staffing, training, which was really highlighted as a priority, maybe even more members, call out rates. So a concern about how we're going to be paying for that. Then we have the fire hall coming on track, and the debt we're going to have to pay off for that, which is at a really low interest rate right now, which could really skyrocket if interest rates start doubling. Then next year we have a request for another new truck coming in, which I don't know how much those are, but 800, $1 million, I don't know what the fire truck costs. Talk of maybe keeping the old trucks, so now we have more trucks we got to insure, maintain, and whatnot. So my overall concern is that we're not going to be able to have the ongoing operating funds to cover for the fire department. And that worries me, because we're going to need to start looking at cutting back in other service areas or further increasing taxes. I guess my question to you is, Raj, is this a valid concern? And what is it looking like moving 5 years down the road?
Thanks,
so
Rob.
we have just started our financial planning exercise for the next 5 years. We'll be updating projections and coming back to council with an updated reflection of what is anticipated over the next 5 years. So my recommendation, I can't answer that question until we've gone through that financial planning process this year. But there are a number of pressures on the fire department, as you had mentioned. Replacement of a couple of major fire trucks was brought to council's attention that require replacement, and there are pressures on the operating costs as a result of the report. However, the fire chief will have to, he will incorporate those to the 5-year financial plan, and we'll try to bring that forward. Well, we'll bring that forward in a sustainable manner as we can. But at that point, in terms of where the funding will come for ongoing expenditures, yes, the taxpayer base will be the funding source for ongoing operating expenditures. What type of pressure we're going to have, we'll have better information on that towards the beginning of November.
Thanks, Raj.
Okay, Maureen.
Thank you. And Raj, just a question concerning the Council Strategic Initiatives line. Am I missing something there? There's $40 noted. Can you just walk me through what that means?
I believe it's a typo in this item here. We're actually year-to-date budget of 20. Oh, sorry. It's an allocation issue year-to-date. The actual budget 2020 budget is 145,700.
Right,
So the budget is probably in the later half of the year in our, so coming up the budget to June 30th. So the budget numbers are probably entered in the later half of the year in terms, because we put budget in monthly buckets.
okay, got it.
So it's probably in a later monthly bucket, definitely in a later monthly bucket. The annual budget for 2020 is just shy of 100. It's shown in the very right-hand column there. It's
Right.
145,000.
Right, and can you recap, forgive me for making you do this, but can you recap what is under that item? What
I
is
don't
currently
have
under-
that information in front of me, but I am preparing a report for Liam to bring forward at the strategic planning session. So I will have details of that information and it'll come forward at the strategic planning session that the CAO has with council.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question just has to do with the capital budget, of which we spent 1.8%. So again, just for perhaps the benefit of members of the public as well as for me, the facilities budget, what is that for? What is the 3.5 million?
I had included that in my report. So the 3.5 million, the significant projects in that include the new fire hall on Miller Road and the community center.
Okay. Okay, my apologies. I read that in
No
your
worries.
report and I didn't make the connection.
Oh, no worries.
Thanks, Raj. No more.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. And
One
Allison's got her hand.
one clarification question.
okay, go ahead.
Looking at the chart, the 2019 actuals number is 2019 to June 30th, right? Not the whole calendar 2019?
Sorry, you're looking at the table of the operating
Yeah,
expenses,
that's on
Allison?
departmental expenditure report.
Okay.
So the column that's headed up 2019 actual, that's only a half a year's expenditure. That's not the whole year.
That's correct. Those are expenditures to June 30th,
Yeah.
2000.
So really the year-to-date heading should have been straddling both columns.
So we've got
I mean, if somebody looks at
actuals for 2019 provided for reference, but the 2020 actual expenditures to June 30th are 3,209,280.
actual expenditures to June 30th in 2019 were 2.8 million.
That's correct.
Somebody's not going to look down the first column and say, oh, the budget was only 59,000 for the emergency program last year, and now this year it's 122. So I just wanted to clarify that the 2019 numbers were year-to-date to June 30th, 2019.
They were.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. So the recommendation is that council receive the mid-year 2020 financial results report dated September 11th, 2020 for information. I move that.
Second.
Thank you, Allison. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Raj.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to 7.8, which is an application for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities for the Eagle Cliff and Cove Bay Water Systems Connection and Improvement Project. And Patrick Graham, over to you.
Hi. So
Hi, Patrick.
this has been brought up previously at the last council meeting in the CAO's update, just flagging that we had a couple of candidates for this grant program, one being the Eagle Cliff, we'll call it the Eagle Cliff Water Project, where we'd connect the Eagle Cliff water system to the Cove Bay water system, as well as a number of other properties that are currently unconnected between those two systems. The other candidate project was the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, which is also a critical project. the feedback we've gotten from the granting authorities is that this water project represents a higher probability of success. And it is a critical project that relates to providing basic level of service to a lot of island residents. So the purpose here is just to provide an update on this project, and I guess more importantly, get council approval to apply for this ICIP RNC. It's the Rural and Northern Community Stream of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, to get council approval to apply for that grant for the Eagle Cliff Water Project. So in order to apply for a grant, you need to have a project that you're applying for. And there's still a lot of options, details to be figured out. For purposes of the grant application, we'd be taking the one of the options from the council report that was presented at the end of June. Option 2B, which is essentially creating a looped system with approximately 70 additional properties along the water main routes, as well as the 109 Eagle Cliff properties that would be connected. And the overall cost of that project was about 3.6 million. The grant could fund up to 100% of the project costs, and the deadline is October 22nd. So our staff have already started pulling that together. Funding decisions, it would likely be, they say, about a year. We would hopefully by the end of summer of next year, we would receive some decisions about the grant funding. So how that ties in with the next steps for this project, we're in the process of procuring engineering consulting services to advance this project, as well as a number of other critical water projects on the island. The other major one is looking at the west side water systems, and water improvements could be made over there to meet everybody's needs. So that RFP, request for proposals, closes on October 1st. And we're hoping, we've gotten some good interest, so we're hoping for good things. The general timelines relating to the Eagle Cliff project would be to, once we've selected a consultant team and kicked off the project with them, between October and March, we would be looking at it, the analysis of alternatives and concept design, and further developing cost estimates. There would be a decision point to be reviewed with council and Eagle Cliff LAC and the broader community before advancing with subsequent phases, because there's significant costs involved. Assuming that we would move directly from phase 1 into the detailed design and preparation of construction documents, that would be from April to September. And then tendering and construction, I've indicated here, essentially in 2022. There would need to be, once design is completed and cost, pre-tender cost estimates are developed, we would need to, expect there need to be some time to confirm community support and also project financing, depending on the grant outcomes. There is a likelihood that there need to be a referendum to authorize debt financing. These are just preliminary dates. The consultants responding to the RFP would submit a proposed schedule and work plan. So all of the information that's attached to this report, the council report from June, the RFP, and all the attachments have been shared with council, Eagle Cliff LAC, as well as the communities at the recent community water system meetings. We've circulated a letter to approximately 150 residences in between Cove Bay and Eagle Cliff system to gauge the level of interest in paying for municipal water service. The letter that went out is attached. To the extent possible, new mains would align with properties that are interested in paying for the system. We do know a number of places where residents have issues with their wells and would likely be interested in that. So we've presented cost information, assuming we don't get grant funding. We would likely, we could get grant funding for up to the entire infrastructure cost, which is about in the order of $20,000 per property. And then there's approximately a $10,000 fee for joining the Cove Bay water systems. These are all very preliminary numbers. Current capital reserves for Eagle Cliff water system are about 230,000. So the grant, potential grant funding is very significant, and there's a likelihood that that financing would be needed in any case. We did get the infrastructure planning grant, which will be put towards the phase 1 costs. The remainder of the phase 1 costs, which we'll know more at the end of this week, will be funded from the Eagle Cliff reserves. And then decisions to proceed with the phase 2 and 3 work would be made in the spring and the fall of next year, respectively. So the communities and the local advisory committees of Eagle Cliff and Cove Bay have been informed about where we're at. We've asked that the consultants build in community consultation milestones and steps into their work plans. So that's something we're hoping to move forward with very quickly, starting in October. And you know, it's important to move this project forward to ensure the long-term reliable domestic supply of high-quality drinking water and adequate fire flows for Eagle Cliff and potentially a number of other properties as well. And this is the municipality's best opportunity to obtain funding through the through this particular grant program. There may not be another intake for this grant program. That's uncertain, but that's possible. So that's it. If there's any questions, we can address those.
Thanks, Patrick. Just a couple of questions I've got here is just one of them. I saw that little note that went out to all the residents and that sort of thing. So I guess that's based, let's just say that 180 people do sign up for that. You think we're still going to need funding above that, infrastructure funding to a certain extent?
Well, it's possible that the infrastructure funding would cover all of the infrastructure costs. And typically, so say that's $20,000 per lot. So the cost for infrastructure could be anywhere from well, it wouldn't be zero because there would be costs along the way that are being incurred. And then the cost to join the Cove Bay water system are typically, joining a water system is typically an upfront cost. You know, it's possible with consultation with the systems involved that a different arrangement could be made that involves paying over a longer period of time.
Yeah, and if I can just add here, I just want to be really clear that it is, if we do get funding for the project, that there will still be some costs that aren't eligible for recovery, and that costs that will have incurred that residents will have to absorb.
Okay, thanks, Liam. I guess the other thing is we do have the capacity in the new water treatment center. Good.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a little gun shy.
Yeah, that was.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll go to the map here. Okay, we got Maureen.
Yeah, one question for Patrick. Do you have any initial indication from the residents that you polled 150 people? Like, what are the early?
I don't yet.
Nothing?
We will be looking into that in the next few days, but I don't have a good sense of that. I know of a few properties that have expressed interest, but we don't have the full picture, which is important piece of information for moving forward with the assessment of options and then design.
Is there a minimum number that you have in mind that you would interpret as this constitutes support from the residents?
Well, depending on the mechanism used, if you were to look at the local expansion process that's laid out in the community charter, then it would be at least 50% of the properties in the proposed service area would have to be on board.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is for Liam. This is the first time that we're applying under the rural and northern program. Does that give us any advantage? Do you know that if we're first timers?
Yeah. Every time that you apply under a program, the more times you're successful under that program, generally the less likely you are to receive funding. So this being our first time under the rural and north, we may be looked a little more favorably upon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Sue Ellen?
Yeah, thank you. I just am delighted to see this coming before us. I think in an era of climate change, it's really important that we look to one of our key things as a municipality is to provide drinking water, right? I mean, a core service, it's like, how do you make families more secure? I used to live in Eagle Cliff a long time ago as a renter. And so I didn't know a lot about the community except from my neighbors. And it was, that would have been before we became a municipality. So we kind of inherited that old reservoir and from, I guess, the province. And I think this makes sense to make this application for funding. And I can't imagine why we wouldn't make this application for funding to help people maintain their quality of life and their property values and their ability to fight fires and to have clean drinking water come out of the tap. I think that's partly why our council exists. Anyway, I'm voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Anybody else? I will read the recommendation as that council directs staff to apply for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities, ICIP RNC, for the Eagle Cliff and Cold Bay Water Systems Connection and Improvement Project. And the council support the proposed project and are willing to provide overall grant management in order to receive the funding. A second on that, please.
Second.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. And no further discussion, all in favor?
Yes,
Aye. Oh,
further discussion.
further discussion, sorry.
Could I just, hold your horses. Could I just suggest a minor addition? Just to the council direct staff to apply for grant funding of approximately 3.6 million through the Investing in Canada. It's in part because I use the resolution tracker a lot to find information, and the more specific these resolutions can be, especially around money, the more helpful they are.
How do you feel about that, Liam? Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Could you insert that, Hope? Council direct staff to apply for 3.6?
So we're accepting that as a friendly amendment, right?
Yes.
Good.
Well, yeah. Okay, approximately $3.6 million for funding.
Yeah.
In funding?
I have suggested to apply for grant funding of approximately 3.6 million through the investing.
Okay, I like that.
One thing that we might discover, and to have some feedback on this before this meeting, but if there is a lot of interest in unconnected properties joining the system, it would potentially make sense to further expand the scope of water lines and water mains in between the two systems. So we looked at a few scenarios, really focused on getting water from Cove Bay up to Eagle Cliff. It's possible that when we get some feedback from the community that a larger project actually makes sense. So we may want to have the flexibility to amend the scope and cost between now and October 22nd, if that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, so are you saying that we would ask for more than 3.6?
Good.
Possibly.
Okay,
So I don't know.
Is that
putting
something that
3.6
we could bring back at the
I think so.
October 12th? We should have an understanding for the community as to what the appetite looks like. And
Yes.
Okay.
Can we maybe solve that problem by putting two little words in instead of approximately, put at least?
Mm,
Because I think when Patrick starts to do it, he's probably going to come in light on the 3.6 and find he wants a little more in there anyhow. So.
why don't we just leave the numbers out until we get some
Well, I
information
would
for
prefer to
feedback?
put the number out, but if you want to have a number in so you can track, then put the words at least in front of 3.6 instead of approximately.
Which you figure is a better way to do this, Liam? Put the number in there or wait?
I understand why Councillor Nicholson would like it in there. It does make a lot of sense. So I think using at least seems might be leave it a bit open-ended.
Okay.
It's like,
Okay, you okay with that, Hope?
Got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll accept that as a friendly amendment. If there's no further discussion, I'll ask a
Hang on,
question.
hang on.
Oh,
What is the amendment then? It's now reads for grant funding of approximately 3.6 million? Is that
No.
correct?
Of at least 3.6.
of at least.
Okay, my concern about that amendment is at least 3.6 makes it sound like it's could be a potentially enormous ask. And I wonder if that might put some people in the community off thinking that we're going to change everything, but also it might leave a funny impression with our potential funders.
I don't know if they're going to be aware of this.
yeah, the resolution does get submitted. It's a requirement,
does it? Okay.
but it wouldn't leave a funny taste in their mouth. But it does. I understand though, using the term at least does feel a bit awkward.
We'll get another name. We can throw another.
Could we just leave it as approximately? Because we could come back to council again right before the application is submitted.
And we're all in agreement anyway around
Yes.
this resolution. So let's land on approximately and get on with it.
Okay, let's change it up to approximately. And I'm going to ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so 7.9, we're going to go back into the consent agenda. So 7.9 is 3.3, which I think was Maureen.
Yes, and again, this is another point regarding the wording of the resolution. I have no concerns at all about the substance of initially 3.3 and 3.4. I just would like the resolutions to indicate more clearly which program is being applied to and how much money is involved. So it means that resolution 3.3, the original agenda, the first clause would read that council supports staff applying for a UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Program grant of $50,000 and are willing to, and so on.
Okay.
It clarifies again, if you're doing a scam of a resolution tracker trying to find information because it's buried 3 years ago, you're more likely to find it. So I would like to move that full recommendation.
Okay.
That council, so do I have to repeat it or are we okay?
That's okay. I'll second it.
Yeah.
And any further discussion? Okay, I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye. Okay, and then 3.4,
Yeah, it's the same thing.
same thing.
So the recommendation that council supports staff applying for a UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant of $25,000 to support evacuation route planning and are willing to provide, etc.
Are you okay with that, Hope?
Yes, got it.
Okay, I'll second that. And I'll ask the question. All in favor?
Actually, before you guys approve that,
Sorry, Raj.
I was going to say, can you remove the provision that says if grant funding is approved? We should include it in the financial plan anyways. And if we don't get the grant funding, then we won't spend the money.
Thanks, Raj.
Thank you, yeah.
I
Both of them?
I support that amendment to remove that last bit.
Yeah, good point. Second.
Okay. All right, all in favor as amended?
Aye.
Okay, well done.
And we're gonna make that change to the first resolution too?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a doesn't change the intent of it. I'll just delete that part.
Okay.
All right. So there, 3.5, Allison, you want to go ahead on that?
I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, and also I would like to see it referred to the APC. So Daniel, are you there? Oh, there you are. Trying to read my handwriting. So I guess to provide your number B, to provide a means for council staff and refer to evaluate rezoning and variance applications. So we can do this kind of thing with a variance application?
We can.
Okay. And then you said that exceed existing minimum building standards. In the old one, it said has a residential component was in there. It just wasn't, it didn't quite, the wording just didn't quite make sense that to provide a means for council and referral bodies to evaluate rezoning and variance applications that exceed existing minimum building standards. I mean, we're trying to encourage them to apply, to adopt standards that exceed.
Yeah, I think some of that's trying to reflect that we already have like step code requirements. We would want for us to evaluate it and say, okay, we're treating it special because it's doing extra, that it would be exceeding.
Well, but you're talking about evaluating rather than provide a means for council staff and referral bodies to encourage applicants for rezoning and variances to exceed existing minimum building standards. I just, the policy is trying to encourage them to do it, not necessarily evaluate how they're going to do it. So I just throw that out for discussion when you're going forward. And the same sort of thing follows through in the bottom. Under the, are there other things like your list of A to G? Do you want and other possible means, or do they have to fit into one of those A to G pigeonholes? I mean,
I mean, it could be good to, I guess, to leave open for other new ones that emerge. Yeah. I mean, I know we found that, so some of our existing ones that are in place, we'll have covenants on properties that have standards that are now getting phased out, and it's quite challenging then to evaluate whether they've met the standards of a standard that no longer is being used.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure whether you contemplated the moving target in what you were doing. And then in the procedures, you've lumped building permits and occupancy permits together. And I don't see how somebody, when they're applying for their building permit, do they get registered under the indicated framework before they apply for their building permit? In the old policy, it was 2 separate steps, and I think it should still be 2 separate steps.
Sure.
But and then my last one was A, in incentives, contributes to a favorable, incentives may be provided by the municipality, contributes to a favorable review of the rezoning or permit application. That just makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I know it sounds like they're buying their rezoning. So I don't know whether you've had a legal opinion on that one. Because
we haven't. I mean, Allison, that's one of the ones that we played around with wording for a bit, trying to show that, like, okay, you know, this is something that council says that they're looking to seek in their rezoning, but trying to leave open that. So in the 5A, the conditions is saying it's still a case by case evaluation of a rezoning at council's discretion.
Yeah, and maybe it's the word incentives in the intro line that's bothering me.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, that was just my comments to sort of be hopefully considered in the review process. And
Okay, thanks, Allison. I had a real issue with parts of this. So what you're doing is you're actually, because the way it's worded, you're saying if somebody applies for a building permit and they have to give you extra incentives and the application will be based on that. I don't like the way it's set up here. And is it large scale development only, or is it a residential building?
So Mr. Mayor, so our current green building policy is a policy for residential rezoning applications. And it says residential rezoning applications are strongly encouraged to achieve a couple of environmental standards. So this is trying to be a redrafting of that one, as we were directed by council to redraft and update that policy. And so what we were trying to look at is, one, what are newer building standards that are available, but then to open it up and say, well, it could be for residential or other applications and could potentially be not just a rezoning, but we could see it in the variance. I think for us to use it through a variance process, it would have to be something that would be tied to the use of it. But we want it as an option of something that we sort of flag for people that this is something that we could see in a variance application. But so it wouldn't change, like the nature of the policy is it wouldn't change somebody just coming for a building permit now. It wouldn't have any effect on them. It's something that we use to evaluate like for those discretionary approvals.
Yeah, I just find it tremendously subjective. If somebody comes and then you're going to ask for more cookies for a certain rezoning, and how do you establish whether that person happens to be giving you enough or whatever? I just, it's not, in my mind, it's not very black and white.
Rezonings aren't. Never have been.
Well, okay, but not to this extent by any stretch. I understand the principle behind it, which is very, honorable and everything, and we got to do what we can. But we don't want to hold people over the bench, as it were, because this stuff all costs money. And if somebody's trying to build a house and they're very cost conscious, and all of a sudden the municipality is saying, well, you're not doing enough stuff on the environmental side of it for us to warrant giving you this this permit. I just find the whole thing a little vague personally, but any comments?
I mean, I would say, Mr. Mayor, it's just the intent of the policy is for when people are coming for rezonings, and then it's meant to be one so that flag for applicants of this is what council values in a rezoning application. But then the application of it is then up to council through the rezoning. So it would differ depending, I think, like the scale of the rezoning, council would be weighing that in terms of the scale of the green building standards.
Yeah, so now you're putting it on council to decide whether this person is given enough to get the permit approved or the variance. It's a funny way of doing things. And I don't know how you can say to one person, well, we think you gave enough here, and say to another person, well, you know, I think we want to see solar panels on your house or something like that. Anyway, I'm going to go to Maureen.
Thanks, Gary. I'll look forward to the feedback from Environment and Climate Action. I think Allison's suggestion to send it to the APC is also a good one.
Okay.
I was trying to recall some of the details of the conversation that we had when this was referred to staff to start thinking about the policy. And one of the things that we talked about at that time was, if I'm remembering correctly, what exactly a green building is. And this policy defines green buildings solely in terms of energy and energy efficiency. And I think that in the absence of an explicit definition, maybe it's defined elsewhere. Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it defined elsewhere?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. So I think if we've got a green building policy, step one has to be a little bit of sustained thought about what a green building is. And in my view, that goes beyond being an energy efficient building. And in light of some of the environmental issues that we face on this island, having to do with water, it would make sense to me that if we were thinking about green building policies, we would also be thinking about things like water catchment and requiring or incentivizing that. Gary's point about, well, what if we require somebody to put a solar panel on? As it stands, I don't think we have any tools that would require or incentivize somebody to put a solar panel on anything. So I think this policy we've moved beyond it. We need a different kind of policy. And the starting point is talking about what exactly a green building might be on Bowen Island in 2020.
Maureen, just to speak to that. So the green building standards do speak to energy and water usage and environmental impacts. So some of those standards are actually, like the Salmon Safe is about water,
okay,
rather than energy.
Okay. That's in your policy?
Yes.
Totally missed it.
Yeah, it refers to about, is it like 7 or 8 different examples of externally verified frameworks, including LEED green building standards, which also does take into consider rainwater management and things like that.
So those references, is there a mention though of water conservation explicitly?
Well, within the LEED green building standards and some of these other standards, those have specific references to water conservation, as well as on-site rainwater management.
Okay, then we need a plain language version of this policy as well, because I read it and that totally went over my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Actually, my comments were very similar to Maureen's, and the answers that we just heard from Liam and from Daniel kind of address them. So I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sue Ellen?
Yeah, I was just wondering if if our climate strategy and the community energy and emissions plan had been referred to in looking at this document, because those are other big ones. Or does this draft standard reflect them?
It doesn't, and sorry, Sue, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I believe like our climate strategy speaks to reducing energy use in buildings without the specifics. So this is in part fleshing out those specifics.
I was just thinking about some of the other things like rainwater infiltration or stormwater management and some of the other things that maybe, I can't remember the climate strategy either. I just thought it would be good to, you might want to check against the climate strategy and the community energy and emissions plan to see if there's anything we could add from them to make them all mesh together.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Allison.
I remembered one, there was a resolution at UBCM in the resolution section where they were wanting green roofs to be mandated. It didn't pass because of the complexity of a green roof and the costs and everything, but it was suggested it could be obtained through a rezoning. So are any of those standards, do they pick up things like green roofs? Is that a living building?
Yes.
Okay.
Could I ask where?
Where what?
Where it's picked up?
So some of the standards that are referenced will have different, I mean, they're all different essentially, but like the living building standards or the LEED green standards do incorporate elements of requiring things like green roofs.
I think another thing that might be of interest is the UBCM motion that Councillor Morris is talking about was about the ability of municipalities to require or manage the impacts of green roofs. So some of this could be when there's a green roof on a building later, can you, when it comes back to council for a variance or something, could you require something to do with a green roof? And municipalities currently, some of them, we don't have some of those powers. And so the resolution that failed was to ask the province to give municipalities some of the tools so they could manage and perhaps require some of the things about green roofs. But that's just extra.
Most of the bylaws that I've seen in the past by municipalities that require green roofs or living walls or those type of building envelope solutions, they're required on fairly large buildings with fairly substantive square foot areas. So I'm not so sure it becomes very cost effective or reasonable for a lot of the buildings on a community of our size.
One of the things that was pointed out in the UBCM discussion on it was the weight of a green roof will require substantially stronger sidewalls and support walls and everything, and trusses, and therefore considerably adds to the expense of and that would be very expensive if there was an extension or an addition or being done.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Morris. I mean, I think green roofs are an excellent idea, but making it a mandatory requirement might be fairly burdensome.
Okay, Michael?
I know the purpose and intent of this is very good, but we're just moving into a new step program and looking at this and listening to comments being made in the last 10 minutes. I quite honestly think this is going to be very confusing. I think it's going to be very difficult. Heaven forbid this is another level of bureaucracy that people have got to deal with. And I'm not sure it's clear. I'm really not, and I frankly would like this deferred for further thought and consideration, because I just, when I looked at this and I'm listening to the comments, I simply don't feel this is ready to go right now.
Thank you, Michael. I agree with that. I think it's a little wishy-washy, and I think there has to be some mechanism in it that has to be a little bit more definitive. But at this point in time, all we're going to do is refer to the Environment and Climate Action Committee for comment, at which time it will come back to council. So we're not actually going to certify it or anything. So is everybody okay with it just going to the Climate Action for the time being and see what they come back with? Sorry?
And the APC.
Okay, yep, sure.
They're the ones that look at the rezonings and things, and they'll understand a little bit more of the practical realities of the whole thing, I think.
Well, yeah, and there's some builders in there too, so that would be more effective perhaps. Okay, so the recommendation is that council refer to the revised green building policy to the Environment and Climate Action Committee and the APC for comment. Second on that? Thanks, David. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Did you want to insert the word draft in there? The revised draft green building? Anyway, I missed that.
Yeah, that's important.
Okay, can you throw that in there? Hope that wouldn't hurt. Draft.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not quick enough with the mute button.
No, that's good calls, Sue Ellen. Thank you. And okay, so see if I can get caught up here. So we're into correspondence, and there's a request for a letter supporting the back to school planning for the Bowen Island students. That's Carly Young and Wendy Selleck, dated September 9th, 2020. And the recommendation is that council receive a letter from Carly Young and Wendy Selleck, dated September 9th, 2020. And the council authorize a letter to be sent out on behalf of council under the mayor's signature to Minister Fleming, Minister of Education, requesting a robust plan from both BC Ferries and the ministry addressing the problems of student travel related to COVID-19. Does anyone want to second that?
No.
Thanks, Sue Ellen. And the only discussion I would have on that is the unfortunate thing with the Bowen students going over there is they go over for a block on the ferry in the morning, 7:30 ferry. They come back on the noon ferry, and I think they go back in again because they have to have an afternoon session too. So I think some of them are taking 2 ferry trips. I'd be willing to hear from somebody that's got teenagers going over there because, which I don't think we have any of. That would be my concern there. But anyway, Sue Ellen, go ahead.
I was wondering if now I didn't realize we were moving it so quickly. I was going to suggest that we remove the words from both BC Ferries and. The reason is because I don't know what the plans were for the schools, but the Minister of Education mandated the full return to schools. So that's according to to the letter that resulted in the school districts abandoning the alternate days or the mornings or afternoons, those different hybrid models. Instead, the mandate was made, and it was kind of like last minute. I don't know if BC Ferries was aware of it. So, but either that or we add the words to Minister Fleming and somebody in the BC Ferries requesting a robust plan.
Well, I think
Councillor Morris has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well,
Allison.
first of all, these requests all came in before school started, or just about I don't know, the same day. BC Ferries has done a lot, my understanding is, to fix now maybe Rob can comment because he goes on the 7:30 ferry. or Maureen if that she's, but Minister Fleming does not exist as Minister Fleming anymore, so we can't send a letter to Minister Fleming. Or
That's
the
right,
minister.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to have to go to the ministry, which means
The deputy minister.
yeah,
Yeah.
the deputy minister. But we don't really know what's happening right now. I mean, I thought the kids just went in the morning and came home for the rest of the day. I didn't think they turned around and went back again.
Well, I saw, I was on the 12 ferry the other day. There was probably 100 kids coming back.
They were on the 12:30 ferry, but they didn't turn around and go back in again later on.
I don't know if they did, but that's the way the thing's set up. So I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a school district issue, not a ministry issue.
Yeah, and because I'm not sure if all the school districts have done it the same way, but I have heard that the high school kids are going half days or 2 days, or each school district might be a little bit different, but we don't even have all the information. And this is asking for the student travel issue, and I'm not sure that the student travel issue is an issue anymore, and is an issue. Has anybody been as a foot passenger and gone upstairs on the 7:30 ferry? They've asked us if we're in our cars not to come up, so we don't.
Right. Hope, do you have any, when was this? Is this the original letter? Because I know there was more than one letter.
Yeah,
I
they're
thought there
all-
was.
There's several of them. Could we refer to the Transportation Committee?
Yep, so there
That's
was
a good
3
idea.
letters received, one with a specific request of council to write a letter to the ministry.
But
What
it's
was the
all to
date?
do with travel, and I'm wondering if it's a non-issue now.
The date was September 9th.
Yeah.
My concern is if we refer it to the Transportation Committee, that's another month.
Yeah.
There's a timeliness issue here. We've already taken more than 2 weeks to actually get to the point where we're talking about this. The sensible thing would be for somebody to get in touch with Carla and Wendy and say, do you still have concerns? And for that information to come back to council before we spend more time talking about this or referring it out.
I did.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah.
I did speak with Anton Van Wolvernen today, and he wrote one of the letters there, and it's his understanding that BC Ferries has actually done a pretty good job with the little information that they had. And he's the one who did a report, traveled with the students on the first day. And that it's actually the school district who hadn't thought about Bowen students and how they would travel. So that's the input that I had today that I was prepared to offer. If there was questions about this, I thought maybe we could send a letter to the school district if we wanted to act right away.
Gary?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I agree with Allison. I think a lot of the problems have been resolved. I did also discuss it with the chair of the FEC, and they had spoken with BC Ferries, and they were working, they felt that they were doing everything they can. So I think a lot of these problems have been resolved. I'm unfortunately not about 7:30. It's a 6:30 there, Allison, or 6:20.
Well, my sympathy.
Well, yeah, thanks. But coming back today was actually, I did come back with the kids, and it was very smooth coming back. So I think a lot of the problems have been resolved, and I don't know if the letter is still in order.
Okay, well, we got Allison. Are you finished there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I would just
Okay.
trying to figure out what the motion should be to,
Well, I think we're going to have to, let's hear from just David first, and then we'll decide what we're going to do here.
Well, I think,
David?
yeah, thanks, Gary. I think people have covered most of the material, definitely sending it to the Transportation Committee. That's just a long delay. And really, we need to try to find out what the situation is now. And certainly a letter to the ministry is just, I think, inappropriate and way too slow. I think it's probably dealing with the school district, but I don't know, and we don't know. So we need to get a little bit of information and see what to do with it. It's not a letter to the ministry, and it's not a Transportation Committee discussion a month from now.
No, I agree with you 100%, David. So I'm going to rescind that the recommendation there, and I think I'd like to direct staff just to check in with Carla Young or Wendy Selleck and just see what the present status is and work on that. And I think maybe a letter if they need some support. I think it's going to be to SD 45 in the school.
Thank you, because I didn't mean to second the motion. I was putting up my hand to ask a question. So
Okay.
I think it's okay if you second it, if you rescind it or whatever, because I didn't second it.
Well,
Okay,
it
thank
hasn't
you.
been seconded then, so it's
Hasn't been
not.
seconded, so yeah, it's not really there anyway. Okay, so we should have a recommendation that the council directs staff to get a hold of the people involved there, Carla Young and Wendy Selleck, and just get an update from them and see if they still require this letter and who it should be addressed to. Because we can't go to the minister, that's the other thing. We could go to the deputy minister, but I don't know what's happening over there right now.
That's not going to be very fast.
No. So that would be my recommendation. How does that look?
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sue Ellen. How does it look there, Hope?
Yep, the council received a letter for information and that council directs staff to follow up with Ms. Young and Ms. Selleck regarding their current concerns and to report back.
And you better follow up with all three people that wrote the letters.
And Anton.
And Aaron Gilgan.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And okay, so I move that. We have a second, please. Oh, Sue Ellen, I had. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've got another request for a letter of support from the Bowen Island Food Resilience Society Initiative, and that's through David Adams. Now, on the on-table package, the revised recommendation is the council received the letter from David Adams on behalf of the Bowen Island Food Resilience Society dated September 23rd, 2020 for information, and the council authorized a letter to be sent under the mayor's signature indicating BIM's support for the Bowen Island Food Resilience Society's application for an investment readiness program in order to facilitate financial and implementation analysis related to the systematic availability of food on Bowen Island. There's a mouthful. I'll move that. Any second? Thanks, Rob. I'll take. And discussion. I think it's worthwhile. They're just asking for a grant and support. They do a good job on Bowen Island. Sue Ellen.
Thank you. I appreciate this request for a letter, and I know that they're a community group that's doing a lot of hard work, hard thinking about a hard issue. It's a wicked problem kind of thing that's coming at us, as they put it. They're worried about the panic of empty shelves and groceries. It seems like a lot of volunteer community groups do this kind of work, but they're looking for grant funding for it. I would have, anyway, I think I need more information. I would like to encourage them to talk to staff about both our emergency management plan, like our hazards and vulnerabilities assessment and how they might fit in with that. And as well, the composting facility and how they might, because I know when we've talked in other times about options for composting and dealing with organic waste, one of the things we've explored is using it to grow local food through some kind of education program. And maybe there are some synergies to be found there. I thought they could, if they're not successful, we could encourage them to apply to our community grants program. Maybe they could talk to potential partners like the Knick Knack Nook. And I just thought also, I like what I read in, there's something about a greenhouse that I don't get, but I haven't seen that information that may be out there. But I like the self-sufficiency approach and encouraging people to grow. I know there was tons of interest this year on Bowen, and people grew a lot of food, and that's what I've got to say. I'd like to see, I was a little concerned by the idea of the broad-ranging research by these community volunteers who are, or sorry, community members who I didn't see a lot of expertise or farming or growing background there. And that might be good if they could hook up with something like that, but good luck. It's a useful project. It sounds like a useful project.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. Anybody else? Maureen?
Yeah, this is one of those time is of the essence kind of applications. They actually have to have their finished application into the investment readiness program before we next meet as a council. I believe it's something like the 9th or 10th or so of October that is their submission deadline. So it's very tight. And the information that we have before us is incomplete. I would like to support the recommendation, but I would like to suggest an amendment. And it's simply that in the second clause, that council in principle authorize a letter be sent under the mayor's signature. And prior to the letter being sent, I would like council to have an opportunity to see the application. Because as it stands, we don't know how much they're applying for. We don't know exactly what role, I believe it's David LePage is mentioned. There are a number of people who are mentioned in passing, and we don't know what they're doing. And that will be sorted out in the process of them drafting their grant application in a hurry over the next little while. So I'd like us to approve in principle. We get the application, which I'm sure will be excellent, but it will also give us some certainty as to what it is we're actually supporting here.
So what are you saying? Are we're going to authorize the letter, but we will get the information afterwards?
Yeah, in principle, and then receive the grant application. If the grant application is fine, send the letter.
So we'll do that by email?
We've done it before.
Is the grant application included in the package, the agenda package, as part of that email chain?
Not completed, no.
Well,
that's right.
Included as an application that was made to the resiliency fund. It's not the application to the investment readiness program. And that wasn't clear to me. I met with them and talked with them for about an hour on Saturday because I didn't know what I was reading.
Okay.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What are you looking at?
Well, I was looking at the budget that's down on near the last page, just above where the colorful page up there, the link that's in our agenda. And
Yeah.
it does have a budget there, but I couldn't see how it fit with what the emails were. And so that's why I said I needed more information, and I second Maureen's amendments and the motion. So now it will read what, Hope?
The council received the letter for information. The council in principle authorized the letter to be sent. And then at the end, adding a caveat that the council received the application prior to the letter being sent.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I accept that as a friendly amendment. So we got two more here. Michael, what were your comments?
Yeah, I met with David Adams as well, and I support Maureen's change. I mean, the clarification. Let's see if we can support them, because they don't have all the time in the world on this. So let's see if we can do just what's been suggested on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, any further comments? I'm going to ask a question. All in favor with the amended recommendation?
Aye.
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 Okay, and opposed? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, we're going to move right on to new business. Metro Vancouver Director David Hawking, update on council Metro Van.
Thanks, Gary. I'm just going to speak about the COVID workshop of a week or so ago, last week. And you remember that letter I sent to everybody that requested that the provincial government send to us or send to all municipalities the weekly community-specific data on COVID case numbers, hospitalizations, deaths, and so on, broken down by age group for each municipality. And I voted against this, but it did get passed. And the reason I voted against it, it was the idea was brought forward by Mayor Harvey of Delta, and it seemed, his reasons were good. He felt that there was too much complacency in his community, and he wanted to make sure people realized. People sort of think, oh, it's not here. We don't need to worry about it. He wanted to make sure people realized that it was here. But others spoke against it, starting with Mayor Booth from West Vancouver, but also Mayor Stewart from Coquitlam, which was really that the Bonnie Henry and she knows what she's doing, and we don't. And she has her reasons for saying that we're not providing that kind of information. She's the expert, she's a scientist on this, and we're not. And the other thing is we couldn't really imagine what could be done with this data. So, you have information that you've got someone in your community that has this, and then what do? Does that mean you don't know where they got it? You don't know whether that was part of their job, whether they got it somewhere else. There are all sorts of issues that you don't know, and it actually makes there's not really much you can do with that data. So those were the reasons I voted against it. There were only it was somewhat split, but it was certainly most people voted for it, so the letter went. And Bowen is so small that it's not information we would want. It would be too personal here anyway. So I doubt that the ministry will do anything with it, but we will see. And I got some comments from a couple of other councillors saying they agreed with my position of not supporting this. That's all I have for now. There's a board meeting coming up this Friday.
Yeah. Thanks, David. I sent you out an email there. I didn't quite understand what SAV was. What were they going for? They wanted all the communities to have the information.
Yes, and SAV, by the way, SAV voted against it as well. There were about half a dozen of us, and SAV was one of them.
Yeah, they made it quite clear that they weren't Bonnie Henry and the group made it quite clear that they weren't going to give out that information because of the anxiety. It's either going to cause a lot of anxiety and or complacency, one of the two. So they thought it was better just that people didn't know about it.
And
so
they deal with it through tracing and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess they're going to give us that information now. Is that what they're saying?
I doubt it.
Oh, good.
I mean, they'll receive the letter, but that doesn't mean that you will change your mind and do that. But they presumably will get a response, and I haven't heard anything about that yet.
Okay. All right. Thanks, David. Islands Trust trustees, Sue Ellen and Michael.
I can lead off if you like.
Sure.
We had a trust council meeting 2 weeks ago, right after the last Bowen council meeting. And it was very constructive, I thought. We changed the tagline. I'll put this in for the two communications people, maybe more, that are in the room. So now it's preserve and protect over 450 islands in the surrounding waters and the surrounding waters in the Salish Sea. Anyway, so we're just, so you're aware. We had Rick Hughes from San Juan County. They're the islands just south of the border. Come and join us because we share concerns about killer whales and sea life, and we're working together with them across the border on big issues like oil spills and trying to get a tug that can pull a big freighter or prevent a catastrophic accident. So that was great to have him there. The Islands Trust Conservancy announced that they had, I'm the vice chair, of the Islands Trust Conservancy, and we've been successful with federal funding for $200,000 for each of the next 3 years. So that's $600,000 grants for species at risk. Yeah, anyway, I'm just thrilled. And this, by the way, is more money than the province puts into Islands Trust each year. It'll be 200,000 compared to 180 from the province. But it also gives us national recognition for the biodiversity that we've got around us in the Islands Trust area. It's a national spot, so we can hopefully get more grant funding with that kind of recognition, our biodiversity here. And more pertinent to with the Bowen Island focus, there's a groundwater strategy that we're working on in the Southern Gulf Islands at the moment. And if it passes muster with our peer review panel, then it might be coming into the north, which means including possibly Bowen Island. So just wanted to flag that, that may be coming our way, whether it's helpful in some of the work, perhaps we can work together on that. UBCM, the Islands Trust put forward a resolution EB83. This was a coastal liveaboard strategy, so that they don't just move from one community to another, and so that everybody's health and safety, including the liveaboards, is taken care of in a more coordinated way. Let's see, we met with ministers, including Minister Heyman about freighters, and Minister Donaldson, former Minister Donaldson, about Crown land agreements. So that could help with Mount Gardner. We met just before Bowen Municipality met. So I was in both meetings. Climate action webinar coming up. First one is tomorrow. And that's on how to harvest rooftop rainwater. And it was just a good collegial conservation attitude. It was a big boost for me coming into the next season. So there'll be more details later.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Michael, anything?
Yes, as Sue Ellen said, we did in fact meet on the 15th and the 16th, and they were 2 7-hour Zoom meeting days. So it was quite long meetings. And it was extremely interesting to hear how many common issues we had with the other trustees, especially as it were related to tourism, over-tourism, under-tourism, as it related to short-term vacation rentals. That was extremely, that bit was always interesting. Part of it doesn't apply so much to Bowen Island because we have our own planners and we have our own bylaws. So that bit is, that bit is of interest to us vicariously. The only thing that really continues to concern me is that when it came to the Islands Trust budget assumptions and principles, looking ahead at what we can see as outlined budget assumptions and 5-year plans from the past, we are going to be still in a situation where every year we will be requisitioned somewhere in the region of $300,000. So whether, as things stand at the moment, and this is for future discussion, but I'd like councillors to know that our future requisitions would look like changing little or none from 300,000 or thereabouts per annum. And that, I think, is a subject I will be discussing further. But anyway, 2 days, and certainly a good exchange of ideas, and it's always interesting to speak to the trustees of the other islands. Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Michael and Sue Ellen. Okay, Councillor Nicholson, update to Council on Metro Vancouver Regional Parks Committee meetings.
We haven't met since our last meeting, but I did forward the feedback on the alternative transportation study, the access inventory. So Jamie Bala, who was the head on that project, has our feedback and is working on part 2, which is dealing in part with water access. So we'll see where that lands. I expect that she'll have wrapped up the second part in a couple of months. So it'll come back to us.
All right, thank you, Maureen. And Allison Morris, to update Council on Translink Mayor's Council meetings.
We haven't met, and we'll be meeting on Thursday and getting an update on the Broadway subway, which is being totally funded by the province and the feds and being managed by the province. So really, it'll just be an update on what's going on and getting a report on the regional road network, which I'll send the link to when it gets posted, which won't be until the 1st of October.
Okay, thank you, Allison. And 10.5 is to move to a closed meeting. The recommendation is the council move to a closed meeting immediately following the regular council meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 90-1-K of the community charter. I'll move that. Second. Thank you. Who's that, Sue Ellen?
Yep.
And all in favor? Aye.
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 Good, thank you. And okay, we've done the consent agenda.
Are you wanting to leave
Sorry?
the meeting and sign back in again?
Well, I don't think Bronwyn's
I guess
around
that's
here anywhere. So that's a question period, and we'll call this meeting adjourned.
5-minute
We got some heavy lifting to do on the closed meeting. So do you want to just take a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Be back at about 10 after,
Okay.
between 10 and 15. Thank you, everybody.
Are we signing off and signing in?
And
Sure,
then-
that'd be great, thanks.
Do we have to sign off? Hope?
Sure, we have a link, just
Sure.
avoid them trying to join the meeting, not that they would, but might as well.
Sure.